Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome back to another Sims 4 video on my channel. I'm still a bit sick, as you probably can hear, so I'm sorry if this video is a bit nasal. Anyway, today we are building some Japanese-inspired townhouses here in Mount Komorebi, which is one of my favorite worlds, as you guys know. So as I haven't uploaded in a few months now, I wanted to upload something a bit more special, even though, as you guys know, I try to make all my builds as unique and interesting as possible. And this build here I think is really cool because you can use the for rent pack to basically have several households living together in these townhouses here. I also added a small cafe here. I'm not sure how the new pack works with the small business stuff shit, because I'm a builder and I don't really care for gameplay that much anymore. And my initial plan was to build a whole neighborhood here, a small neighborhood. I wanted to have some areas where your Sims could like meet. For example, I wanted to have a playground here and also additional shops. But to be honest, I don't really like the medium-sized or large lots here, so I started building on this very small lot, which I think is only 20 by 15, which is I think the smallest lot here. And so that's the reason why we only have the cafe here and these very small townhouses. To be honest, they're only for, I would say, a maximum of 2 Sims, because as we'll see in a moment, they're really small. They only have like a kitchen with living room area, which is all one room. They have a very small 2x2 bathroom upstairs and the bedroom. That's it. So depending on your playstyle, I would say these houses are too small for some players, because I know there are people out there who like to play with really big families. But I think it's also a challenge for me as a builder to like furnish these very small houses, which I really enjoy doing. It's my favorite thing to build. But I also think these houses here are a bit more realistic, even though they are not very authentic Japanese. I would say it's just my interpretation of the very interesting style that we have in Mount Komorebi, which is a mix and match of different influences, I would say. So what I mean by more realistic is the size of the houses, so they're really small, and I think this is what you would find in a big city like Tokyo. I'm not entirely sure how big these houses actually are. They're not exactly the same size, but they're all 4 tiles wide, which is very small. So you also have to take into consideration that there's stairs leading to the first floor here, which also takes up a lot of space. But I try to make it work, and also to give each of these houses an individual character so that they don't look the same. So the interior of each house is also different, and I try to match the interior with the exterior, and they all look different, as I said before. So I'm also curious what you guys think who would live in these houses. So if you have any idea, let me know in the comments below. Create some Sims, tag me somewhere. I know that a lot of you are like into creating Sims, some of you are into building, some of you are into renovating, and some of you like to play the game as it's intended to be played, and like to use my houses in their gameplays, which is also the reason why I try to make my builds functional, just in case somebody wants to use it in the game. So before we move on to the interior, let me tell you a bit more about the exterior here. So each of the houses has some kind of entrance area here, and I wanted to have like some kind of fence or super high wall that really separates this part here from the rest of the build. Unfortunately, there are not really that many super high fences in the game, and I didn't want to use a wall here just because it would be too high in my opinion. And I really like this fence here, which is, I would say, the perfect height. It provides some privacy here, even though you can see through the gate, but it doesn't matter too much. I also wanted to have some kind of parking space here for cars, but I decided against it later on because it took up so much space, as you can see here with the white car, and therefore I decided that the rest of the inhabitants here simply don't have cars. And this way I could use the entrance area here for like some planter boxes, for some gardening accessories, for some plants. I also wanted to use different gates that are in the game, and I think as we don't have that many big gates, it would not be very realistic to have cars parked directly in front of the house, because there would be no way to get them in or out of there. So I think this was the right decision here. So another thing that I associate with Japanese culture is having lots of plans for these like suburban looking builds, which is one of the reasons why I like to build like Japanese inspired builds, because as you probably know if you watched some of my older videos, I like to do very excessive landscaping most of the time at least. I mean, I did some more modern builds where the landscaping is a bit more simplistic, I would say, but most of the time I like to use lots of plants, lots of terrain paint. And this is also the reason why this build here is a bit more overgrown, but in a controlled way, I would say, which is what makes Japanese architecture so distinct in my opinion. So as I said before, I wanted to make each of these houses unique, so we have different types of roofing here, and this house here in the middle also has a skylight, which is very nice. As you can see here, we have a lot of natural light from the ceiling here. The rest of the house was pretty dark because the windows are so small, so I added a lot of ceiling lights and later on additional windows to the sides, which I couldn't do with the house in the middle, which is the reason why I wanted to add the skylight here. And I'm pretty pleased how this turned out. So at this point I was adding some more decorations outside and also some lights here. So for this build I didn't want to restrict myself to any packs because I wanted to use everything that I have. So it's not base game, it's not Snow Escape only, it really uses an excessive amount of packs, but don't worry if you don't have that many packs. I also have a playlist for packs that only use Snow Escape and base game, of course, and there's also a base game playlist on my channel if you're interested in checking out my base game builds as well. And trust me, you don't really need that many packs to build something cool, because I like to use base game from time to time, because to be honest, there are a lot of nice objects in there that I like to use a lot, also for builds that are not exclusively base game. The playlists are also in the description below if you want to check them out, but now back to the build. So as you can see, I started working on the interior here, and the first house here is supposed to be the oldest, or at least the oldest looking house. So to be honest, I didn't really think what the aesthetic for the first house would be, so I just started building here. And I decided, and as I was building, I started to use all these like shabby looking, used looking things like the fridge here, and the used counters from, is it Eco Lifestyle? I'm not sure. And it all came together so well that I just went with the flow. And the first house I would say is for like a student who's very much into gardening, because I had a lot of plants here, who was also really tight on cash, so they decided to use the old furniture that was left behind by the previous tenants here, or maybe they got it for free somewhere or bought it at a garage sale, I don't know. At least that's the vibe I was going for. So here's the kitchen area, and as I said before, the first floor is basically just one room with the kitchen and the living room area here. So for me, it's really interesting that all of the houses turned out differently in terms of layout and how spacious they feel, because they're basically the same size. I think the last one might be a bit bigger than the rest. The middle one is certainly the smallest, I'm pretty sure about that. But it was a lot of fun furnishing these houses because they're also different, and at first I was a bit nervous because usually furnishing one house and playtesting it takes up a lot of time, but this time I was just building. I really enjoyed it. I had some good music on, I had a podcast on, I was simply building, which was really nice. I really enjoyed it because sometimes it's really hard for me to build because I try to make everything perfect, and I focus on every little detail, and it's so exhausting sometimes that I simply stop working on a build. There's so many builds in my gallery which I will probably never finish because I encountered some kind of problem, and I simply lost interest in finishing the build because it wasn't fun anymore. So I start working on a different build, and it's kind of frustrating for me as well because there's so many good builds in my gallery which I simply abandoned. But I really wanted to finish this one here, so I put in the effort, and I'm glad I did because I really, as I said before, I really enjoyed building this, and I'm pretty happy how the build turned out. So initially I used some white plaster here for the ground floor, which I also used for the first floor upstairs, and I'm not sure how much sense the tiling makes, but I really like how it looks, and so I simply decided to keep it. It's my build, I can do whatever I want. And I think it also fits the shabby old-fashioned aesthetic I was going for. Shabby might be the wrong word here. I would say it's old-fashioned, but cozy, I would say. And as I said before, I'm pretty happy how this turned out. So for this build, I used some of my favorite objects here, which are the planter pots from Snowy Escape, of course. the fridge, which a lot of people seem to hate. So this fridge is really notorious because a few years back I uploaded a short and somebody left a comment about the fridge. They didn't really like it, and a few thousand people agreed. Somebody even wrote the fridge gives fridge I found laying on the sidewalk vibes. So this fridge is a bit controversial to say the least, but I like it, I like to use it. I think it also fits the aesthetic of this particular build here, so I wanted to use it. And I think it's a pity that we don't have more objects that look a bit more used, that look a bit more realistic, because not everything is squeaky clean. And I think if I ever created a pack for this game, it would probably be something like cozy realism, used objects, stuff kit. I'm not sure if people would want to have this in their game, but like I said before, there are not too many used looking objects in the game. There's one chair which I really like, but it only has 1 or 2 swatches with scratches. It would be really nice to have some more objects with used looking swatches. Anyway, as you guys can see, I started to work on the second house here, and I used the same flooring here as for the first one because I think it looks really nice, but I wanted this house to be a bit more modern, and therefore I used some furniture that looks a bit newer. For example, the counters here from Dream Home Decorator, and this stove here, which is from Snowy Escape, but I eventually switched it out later on. So at first I wasn't sure about the color scheme or aesthetic for the second house, so I simply started building, and I really like the orange fridge here, so I decided to use some more neutral colors here, different wood tones, and orange as an accent color. I eventually got rid of the wall pattern here because I don't like the trim here. I think it's too dominant. But I also changed the wall here for our first house because I think this tile here looks really interesting, and so I decided to go for something a bit more unconventional because I'm not really sure if having tile in your living room is a thing. Let me know in the comments below if you have a living room or if you have ever seen a living room that had tiled walls. For flooring it's fine, but I think I've never seen tiled walls in a living room before, so I think I would consider it unconventional. So as these houses are really small, it's really difficult for me to add windows because, for example, the center house here has basically 2 walls where I can add windows because it's built in between the first and the third house, so we have only the back side and the front side. And I wanted to add windows to the front as well, but I couldn't do so on the first floor here because I think at the time I was building this, I felt like it wouldn't look too good, so I decided to just have doors in the front and move the windows to the first floor. So as per usual, I tried to squeeze in as many details as possible, even though I did a little bit less cluttering than usual. So as you can see, these houses don't really have living room areas. It's just like one larger medium-sized room here for basically the living room, the kitchen area, and the dining area all in one. And on the first floor we have our very small bathrooms, which are just 2 by 2 squares, and the rest is for the bedroom. So these houses are really small. I'm not sure if they would be sufficient for you guys or if you guys would like to live in a smaller house like these here, but I feel like they're pretty fitting for what I'm trying to build here because in most major cities, even in the outskirts, living space is scarce, I would say, and I think these houses could definitely exist and probably do exist. Anyway, I told you guys before that I wanted to build something a bit more modern for the second house, and I tried to continue that theme, but it turned out more minimalistic and still kind of rustic looking, but I kept it because I think it fits the overall aesthetic of the house. And to be honest, most real houses don't really have a theme going on for the whole house, so there's like a theme for the room, I would say, but not for the whole house. So I think it's fine. Don't get me wrong, I've built rooms and houses with an overarching theme, but I didn't want to do that here. So as I said before, I think it's fine. But if you really dislike it, you can of course redecorate the whole house, and don't fret, we have a house with an overarching theme, which is the blue house to the left, which I will start furnishing in a second. But first I needed to add more plants to the roofs because I like how this looks. I feel like it's the right vibe for this build here, and so I decided to add more plants to all of the roofs. And to be frank, I really wish we had plants to decorate roofs. I'm not sure if there are any. I know that there are some that go on walls, which I also used here, but I think we don't have any plants that are explicitly used for roof decoration. I think it would be difficult to implement in the game because roofs can be all shapes and sizes, and I think it would be difficult to put that in the game, so I'll have to make do with what we have, and what we have is good, not great, it's alright, but it could be better. But I think this can also be a good thing because for us players, it's an opportunity to be creative, to use what we have in different new, creative, and interesting ways. And I've learned so much from other builders when I check out their builds on social media, or if I check out their YouTube videos, of course. And this helped me to further improve and develop my own techniques, which you guys are probably familiar by now if you watch my videos more frequently. But as I said before, the most important aspect with this game is be creative, build what you like. If you're not passionate about it, just don't do it. Which is also the reason why I didn't upload much recently. Not much is really an understatement. I didn't upload anything new because I was really busy doing other stuff, working. But I have so many unfinished builds sitting in my gallery which I would like to share with you guys, to use in your games, to use for challenges, to just check out and look at different types of builds, which hopefully inspires your building as well. But hey, one day at a time, and at least I got to finish this video today, which took way too long in my opinion because I built this in like 3 days at most. So this was a rather quick build, at least for my standards, and I tried to not get stressed because I just wanted to build something that I would really enjoy building, and I did. I was sick at the time I built this, so I wasn't really in a condition to build for longer periods of time, so I had to be quick building this. And as I said before, I really enjoyed building this because it was also a bit of a distraction from being sick, and in a way being sick was a good thing because it forced me to be quick. As you guys know, if you watch my videos more frequently, I'm a really slow builder, and usually builds like this take forever, and that's because I'm kind of a perfectionist with my builds here, because I want to build the best thing possible to share with you guys. But I think it's not always healthy because if you obsess over certain details that could be different, not necessarily better, but just different, I think it can be very stressful at times. And being forced to build more quickly was kind of refreshing because, as you guys can see, the house turned out pretty good in my opinion, at least. If you don't like it, again, let me know in the comments below. I take any kind of feedback. But it also was kind of interesting to see what I could achieve in just a few hours spread over the course of like 3 days, as I said before. Anyway, back to the build. As you can see, for the last house, I decided to go with a modern interior that also matches the exterior of the house, because I feel like the third house here is a bit more modern than the rest of the houses, or at least it looks a bit more modern. And for the color scheme, I decided to go with light blue for the walls and base everything else on this color. I also wanted to have wooden elements here, but not necessarily in natural wood colors, so I decided to go with white here for the wooden flooring, which looks pretty good in my opinion. At first I was a bit worried that the house would look too cold, but then I decided to add some objects like this dresser here that have a natural wood look, I would say, and also some more colorful objects like this wall-mounted clock here, which is one of the clocks that I basically never use, but I think it fits here. Actually, I really like it for this build, even though it's green, but I also feel like it's a nice contrast, and therefore I decided to keep it here. I also want to make this house a bit bigger and create a more interesting shell, because all these houses are basically boxes, and I feel like what makes Japanese architecture so interesting are all these little details and interesting parts that all work together to form an interesting whole. And I also tried to incorporate this into this build here, and I learned a lot from my previous builds, for example the Komorebi neighborhood, which was my first Japanese inspired build. You can check it out on my channel. The video is not really good in any way because there is no commentary, and it's also stop motion, so if you're not interested in that, I wouldn't recommend watching it. But if you're interested in checking out the houses, you can of course either check out the video or download it from the gallery. It's of course fully functional, and with the new for rent pack you can actually use the different small apartments and individual buildings that are created. I'm still pretty happy how this build turned out, because at the time I was I wouldn't say a beginner, but I was certainly not an expert in building, which to be honest, I'm still not today. However, I put a lot of time into that build because I wanted it to be perfect. I even downloaded custom content, well, or to be more specific, so it's not really custom content, but actually it is. But the game considers it, I think, base game, so you shouldn't have any problems if you actually want to download the Komorebi neighborhood. It should be fine. And as I said before, if you're just interested in checking out the houses themselves, you can go towards the end of the video. There's a showcase section like I do every time with all of my videos. Or if you want to support me, you can of course watch the whole video. It's not very long anyway, I think like 6 minutes or something like that. So moving on to our last part here, which is the coffee shop. So we have 3 houses and the coffee shop. I'm not sure how to make this work, or if you could actually make this work by making use of the new gameplay functions that come with like businesses and hobbies, or is it hobbies and businesses? I'm not sure. I don't own the pack, but I'm pretty sure it should work with for rent, so you could split up the individual houses and have a business here with the new pack. If you own both of the packs, let me know in the comments below how they work, and if you could combine them to make this build work, that would be really interesting for me to know. I recently bought for rent because it was like on super sale at an actual store, and so I got a physical copy which only had a download code inside, which is kind of ridiculous, but I guess that's the reason why it was on sale, because most people just use the online store. Anyway, it was like dirt cheap, so I bought it, and I'm really looking forward to using it because some of the objects look really cool, especially the tiling, but until now it wasn't really enough to convince me to buy it. But the best part about for rent is probably that you could actually split up this lot into 3 different units, so house 1, house 2, house 3, 4, like individual households, which is really nice. And to be honest, they should have put this in base game. I think it's one of the most basic features they should have included in this game. I will of course test if that's how for rent works, or you guys just tell me in the comments below, but as you know, I'm more of a builder. I'm not really into regular gameplay, and I'm always happy if my houses get used for actual gameplay by you guys. Anyway, we're at the end of the video. If you made it this far, I want to say thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed my video, and if you did, please don't forget to leave a like. If you're interested in more videos like this, you can always go to my channel, and I know I'll use a lot of packs for this build, but I also have quite a few base game builds on my channel. There's a dedicated playlist for that, and there's also a playlist for 1-pack builds, which is pretty self-explanatory. But if you have only a few packs, you can check out these playlists for builds that work with the packs you have or base game. Anyway, I'm just adding a few more details here and there, and please don't click away, there's a showcase section at the end of the video as always. But that's it for the build part. I hope you enjoyed the video. See you guys next time.